For the first time in history, every generation has something to learn and something to teach. It's always been that the elders of any given society have all the power, but now, because of technology, the youngest generations have just as much to offer and to bring to the table in terms of skills and knowledge as older generations.
Welcome to Rise and Stride, where we empower you to take your next step in an ever-changing business landscape. Here's your host, Denise Leduc-Fremy, President and CEO of the California Society of CPAs.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rise and Stride. With me today is Sarah Sladek, CEO and Chief Strategist of XYZ University, a workforce management consulting and training company. She is also CEO and Chief Strategist of Sarah Sladek and Company, a future-focused membership strategy firm. Sarah has been helping organizations engage future generations of members and talent since 2022 and has authored 5 books and several research papers exploring generational traits, demographic and economic shifts, membership, and employee engagement. Prior to those positions, Sarah had been Executive Director of the National Association of Women Business Owners, the Minneapolis chapter, Communications and Media Relations Director for the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce, and Managing Editor of Finance and Commerce, a daily business newspaper in Minneapolis. So Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And I think I was trying to think back of when we first met, and I think it was 2012 or somewhere in there. And we had our first conversation about workforce and what it looks like and the changes. I think that was then.
Yeah, and it's like no time has passed at all, right?
No, exactly. It feels like decades ago, right? With COVID. And the world has changed so much from then. So I'm really looking forward to catching up with you again and just seeing where you're going and some of your insights.
Yes, thank you.
So maybe we can start out with you telling us a little bit about XYZ University and your Sarah Sladek and Company, and just really how you developed your passion for workforce management.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to do that. So, yes, Sarah Sladek and Company is the parent organization of XYZ University, as well as Membership University, which is kind of our other side of the house. We do a lot of membership research and strategy development. But for today, we're talking about workforce strategy and development. And I started out my career, as you mentioned in my bio, I started out as a business journalist, and I was promoted to leadership at a very young age and came into the workforce and ended up managing people twice my age. And it was an incredibly difficult experience. Shortly after that, I went to work as the director of media for a chamber of commerce. And I had the opportunity to go to some national conferences. And I had a light bulb go off when I was at one of these events, because I noticed that I was by far one of the youngest people. And again, at that time, I was still in my 20s, and I was mistaken for being someone's daughter. And I was just looking around thinking, where are the young professionals? So those two experiences combined, I had this moment where I started to think, wait a second, there's a lot of media happening right now where companies are complaining. At that time, it was about Generation X. People are complaining that they can't recruit and retain younger talent, and what is wrong with this generation. And in the meantime, I'm experiencing a lack of peers in these circles that I was in of leadership, as well as a lack of respect, and just all these things were simultaneously happening. And I just had an aha moment, and I thought to myself, wait a second, if we don't get really good at engaging younger people and succession planning and baton passing and leadership development, we're going to be in a really tough spot in the not too distant future, because we already knew at that time that the baby boomer generation was huge. There was this huge population bulge. Most of them were in leadership. And at some point, they inevitably would retire. And at the time, there was just a lot of challenge around this topic and a lot of stereotyping around this topic of young people. And I believed with all my heart that it wasn't a generational flaw. It wasn't a character flaw. It wasn't, oh, those young people, they don't like to work. I believed that something else was going on. And hence, I started my business, and we've been researching workforce challenges, talent development, leadership development, all of that, as well as generational gaps for the past 20 years.
You have a lot of data, I'm sure, on that.
Yes.
People would say, oh, it's this generation or that. I thought people have been saying that forever, right? And so I think I always like to think, being not on the younger professional side, that I think it's mindset a lot of times. And I think it's not just, I said this the other day, it's not the gray hairs you have in your head, it's the gray matter you have in your mind, right? And it's how do you have that different perspective? And so just to kind of follow up on that and what you've been saying, how do you see kind of the workforce is changing in the workplace just because of some of those challenges and opportunities that are out there?
Right. So the challenge you just mentioned is a great example of some change we're seeing. So yes, absolutely. Throughout history, people have always complained about the younger people following their footsteps. It's always a lot of criticism about the next generation. What is interesting is that if you take a look around, our society has actually shifted to be more child-centric in the past 20 years, but our workforces have not. We're still struggling to catch up and be able to engage young people and actually prioritize young people. But if I had to boil down, outside of shifts in parenting and being more child-centric and all of that, if I had to boil down the gap that we're seeing in the workplace, it really comes down to this. This is very simplified, of course, but it really comes down to this. Baby boomers and Gen Xers, so generations born prior to 1982, are really the last generations of the industrial era. And that might sound really crazy because the industrial era was founded in the 1700s. So come on, Sarah, how can we still be in an industrial era? Well, in the industrial era, everything had a process and a hierarchy. And you would do A and then B and then C, and you would start your career at the bottom and work your way up the ladder. And everything was very linear in its approach. But ever since technology arrived and went mainstream with home computers in 1982, the world changed. And for the generations that have been born and raised since then, there is nothing linear about our society or about their upbringing at all. It is on demand, instant gratification, globalization, customization, flexibility, mobility, and on and on and on. And it's very disrupted. It's very reactive. It's constantly innovating, constantly changing. So nothing linear. So as a result, we have young people that come into the workplace and they look around and they say, this doesn't really make sense to me. And is there a better way? And have you ever thought of this? And then we have current generations that are saying, we've always done it this way, and step aside, right? So that's really the crux of all the conflict that's happening. And it's really a very simplified way of boiling down the massive amount of change that we're seeing and why we're seeing it.
That's one of the best explanations for kind of that divide, because a lot of times it's just said it's this generation or this, and I think, no, it's not. But I really can understand that part of the process piece and it being linear. And now it's just, plus the uncertainty, it's just all over the place. And I can see the frustration. And I always say, if someone said to me, this is how we always done it, you cannot think that way anymore. You just
No,
can't. That's a great explanation.
no, and it is very challenging because, you know, we don't really step back and think about it very often, but yes, we are experiencing a tremendous amount of change. And so it used to be such long arch thinking, you know, someone would be in their career, their job for the same company for their entire career. And that's not happening anymore. Things are just popping all the time, right? Changing all the time. And so we have to be adaptive and nimble and innovative and responsive and all these things. But absolutely, we still have leaders and organizations that are really resisting that idea of change and keep saying that, keep wanting things to be like they've always been. And there just is no going back. We have to go forward.
Yeah, the forward. I know when people say, oh, we have to go back to the old way. There isn't that anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't. So with that, what's your advice to us to build stronger relationships? What things can we do that build those, and then other things we can do that can destroy those relationships?
Right. So collaboration. It's absolutely crucial right now. And again, this is something that we've not learned how to do this. We have not learned how to collaborate. We have not learned how to team build, because the generations in power right now, and in leadership, which are predominantly baby boomers and Gen Xers, they learned that hierarchical industrial era model and approach to work. They did not learn how to collaborate and build multi-generational teams or cognitive diverse teams. So cognitive diversity, meaning that you're bringing together people of different ages, skill sets, backgrounds, departments, areas of expertise to problem solve, ideate, brainstorm, and make decisions collaboratively. So we tend to think of collaboration as something you do every once in a while by a project or a task. But actually, we're seeing that the organizations that are really, really successful today are collaborating day in, day out. And they're actually bringing experienced talent to work side by side with young entry-level new talent. And as a result, these relationships foster, and you're learning and you're teaching. Both sides of the spectrum are. And you're building trust from one another. You're building empathy for one another. And as a result, everyone just feels more engaged. What we don't want to have happen is the way we've run our businesses and our teams for the past several centuries. And that is that a very small select group of people who happen to have the most wisdom and the most experience, that very small group, that echelon, they talk amongst themselves and then tell everybody else what to do. And that's not working anymore for two reasons. One, it fosters fear. So right now, we find that people are so incredibly afraid of change, because what if I make a decision or I do something new or different and it fails? And everybody's afraid of that failure. And it's kind of scientific. When you encounter a change, the prefrontal cortex in your brain, it lights up, and initially you get really excited about that change. And boy, we can do this and it's going to be amazing. But guess what? The prefrontal cortex's capacity is really limited. So it burns out, and it doesn't take very long. And all of a sudden, people are feeling really anxious about the change, angry, frustrated, tired, saying, forget it. This is too difficult. But when we work as teams, and we're in it together to problem solve and innovate, all of a sudden we feel less tired, less worried. We're in the trenches together, and we're going to figure this out together. And so it's a very effective management tool. But the other reason we need to do it is because for the first time in history, every generation has something to learn and something to teach. And that has never happened before. It's always been that the elders of any given society have all the power, and everyone sits around and gathers and listens to the elders. But now, because of technology and advancements in information and education and all these things, we're now developing new skills, new areas of expertise, and the youngest generations have just as much to offer and to bring to the table in terms of skills and knowledge as older generations. So we need to capitalize on that and practice that cognitive diversity. And that'll help us as teams to be able to move organizations forward.
I think of the, COVID, and everyone says it's accelerated everything, really. This too, when you think of, because this was happening anyway, we knew, but it's the technology piece front and center right now. You can't move forward unless you really understand that. And what better way but to reach out to, like I do my son, to help get help. A lot of times he's like, you can figure it out. So, but yeah, I hear that. That's really great advice for all of us that are leaders. And you can lead wherever, I believe, wherever you are in an organization. There's the wisdom at every position, at every level. And I just was on a call today, and it was with some people from Apple, and they said, their philosophy is you can fire, I'm putting that in quotes, your manager. You really, there's no hierarchy there. We all work together, and we can provide feedback no matter where it is. And I think that's so important.
It is incredibly, yes. Yeah.
To hear that. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can just switch gears a bit here. And maybe let's talk about DE&I, because that ties right into exactly what you were saying, those diverse voices, the inclusion. But what else can we do to help advance that imperative, I believe, in everything that we do? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I think the important thing is that there is no such thing as diversity in the eyes of young people. It just is. It's just people. And that is because, our world is getting more and more diverse all the time. It's because we have Gen Z right now who have been raised during the Marriage Equality Act, and we have families of all types and sizes and genders and races, and it's a melting pot. So for Generation Z especially, they're just expecting diversity. They want it baked in. They only notice when it isn't baked in to the culture and to the organization. I think a lot of organizations do a lot to segment. And I think we just have to start celebrating our teams and our people for who they are, rather than, I think there's been so many efforts to, let's have a women's initiative, let's have a young professional initiative, let's do this, let's do that. Well, in a way, it's nice to have a peer community within your organization, but the other thing it's doing is it's constantly segmenting. And I think the workforce of the future, as more Gen Zs get in the workforce, they're really going to frown upon that and not like that. They're just going to say, let's just create a place where everyone feels like they belong. And yes, there's some peer networks, but it should just be a community of one rather than a community of several different segments and pieces. One of the practices that I really admire is an organization where the CEO came in, and it's actually an association. This was a few years ago. But the leader said, why do we have all of these segmented divisions? And why is everything so incredibly hierarchical? And literally, we're alienating voices of young people. So she mandated that from here on out, every decision-making entity, whether you're a committee or a board or a task force, whatever it may be, from here on out, we're going to make sure every decision-making table has at least 30% of the people in their first 5 years of practice, which I love because it's being very intentional about practicing that cognitive diversity. And let's bring people in. And eventually, you won't have to mandate it. It would just be, hopefully, we'll get to that point. But again, that idea that if we're going to succession plan and we're going to leadership develop and we're going to be intentional about the future and we're going to stay relevant, well, gosh darn it, we better make sure we have future generations at the table and future leaders at the table, and we're learning from one another. So I think that's really, really key going forward, and to be able to create those very inclusive cultures.
Said a lot there. It was packed with a lot of good advice. I mean, the community of one, I've heard, people, new generation will only notice when it's not there. I thought that's powerful. And really, our members that are listening, the firms, really that 5 years, in the first 5 years of practice to get that voice, I think is incredibly powerful. And it's something I'm going to keep thinking about. We try, at Cal CPA to engage. We want everyone to engage in the decisions that we make, because there's always blind spots, right? And unless you engage other voices, you will miss the mark for sure. And then you may even miss the mark, which is fine. Fail fast and keep moving. So you just have to be that way. But that was a lot of good advice.
Yeah. I should add as well that it didn't get a whole lot of a publicity, I don't believe. But a few years ago, the United Nations actually launched an initiative that they called Youth 2030. And it's still around. But again, at the time, they ushered up a call to action to all organizations and all leaders globally and said, the time is now. We can no longer work for youth, but we need to work with youth. And they asked organizations to be very mindful of working side by side with young professionals, or even doing outreach to schools and to youth in their communities or their industries. And I think there's been some movement towards that, but oh my goodness, not nearly enough. And here we are, the Great Resignation, and that's long been predicted. People act like it's new and it's pandemic. No, this has long been predicted. Gallup started researching workplace engagement in the year 2000. It became very evident in the late 1990s that people were not happy at work, and it's merely accelerated and it's sustained. And this is not new. People are unhappy, and so they're leaving. So part of that is because we've lost touch with what younger generations want and need and expect. And it has to be a two-way street. We're no longer living in a world where it's a one size fits all, or where it's do what I tell you to do until you earn your place in seniority. That's not a relevant model anymore. So it's absolutely imperative that we're working side by side.
Do you just your opinion? Do you think that because during the pandemic, there was, heavy shift, different perspectives, was so happy to see that. And now I feel like sometimes people are trying to go back. And even when I talk to some CEOs, like, I don't really understand where you're going, because there's proof that a lot of what we have implemented in the last 2 years is working. So do you feel there's like some of that pullback that you're seeing?
Oh, yes. 100% amen. It's, I think that a lot of organizations and leaders are almost excited that, yay, let's go back 3 years. And that is also contributing to turnover. That lack of flexibility, for example, the lack of virtual, the resistance to be tech savvy or, use technology. Yes, there's been definitely, unfortunately, a shift backwards. But also interestingly, because people are so incredibly upset about that, at the same time that this is happening, there's been research to say workplace hostility is at an all-time high, workplace conflict is at an all-time high, and hostility towards young professionals is at an all-time high. So the more these organizations and leaders try to go backwards, I think that is actually contributing to more and more toxic cultures and more of a revolution that's happening because people are saying, no, we're not going backwards. We have to go forwards. And that's contributing to some of the conflicts.
That's interesting. Well, I believe in social cohesion and being together, but there's different ways to do it. So hopefully we'll find that. I'm sure we will. The path forward for sure. So many good insights that you've shared with us. I'd be interested to know how you define leadership. Because I said, as I said, you can lead from wherever you're at. But what tips would you give anyone who's in a position that's not really a leadership, I want to say direct reports, for them to really lead? Because I believe it's important.
Yes, absolutely. So I think leadership is an action, it's not a title. And I think we're seeing the evolution of leadership right now. I think that we have a lot of people who are unhappy with leaders and leadership and how leadership is being defined and utilized. I think leadership going forward is going to be incredibly focused on both the future and putting people first. And I think leaders going forward will be those who are very charismatic, naturally gain those followers, again, not by title, but by action. I think that they will be those who seek to constantly push away from status quo. They're not going to be comfortable with the status quo. They're going to constantly seek for new innovation from new people and be open to learning as well as teaching. And I think we're just experiencing a tremendous evolution in terms of leadership and where it goes from here. And absolutely, you can lead at any age. And what is so fascinating is reading about the number of young people, even as young as 10 years old, starting at businesses, or they've become influencers on social media, or they're making money, on social media or through their businesses. This idea of, drive and innovation is happening younger and younger and younger. It's not exclusive to how many years of experience you have or how much college credit you have or those types of things. Leadership's evolving to mean something considerably more.
It's true. And I must say, we have a number of firms and member firms that have been very progressive in the leadership and allowing the younger generation to step up and to lead. And so I want to just kudos to them because I've talked to a number of them.
Oh, absolutely. One more thing I'll just say about leadership. The intent of leadership is to improve an organization. It's to lift people up. It's to really invest in the caretaking of an organization and its people and its mission. And I think, I think in so many aspects of our society, leadership is not doing that right now. And that's part of why we have tremendous discord and conflict in our workplaces. Leadership was never intended to stall or slow down progress. So I just wanted to put that out there, and if you're stalling or slowing down progress, you're not technically doing your job as a leader.
That's great. It reminds me of the quote that a manager takes people where they want to go, a leader takes people where they don't want to go.
Yeah.
And really that future. So, well, with that, we could have a whole nother conversation. So we will have to get back together.
Yes.
Because there's so much here. But I just appreciate you sharing your perspective, as I did, 10 years ago when we talked. And I think you were just kind of starting out, or you had 5 or 10 years under your belt, and you just, I remember just going to take on the world, and you still have that passion. So I commend you for that. Thank you for being out there and for continuing to just ignite that spirit in all of us, because I think we have to have that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be interviewed, and yes, best of luck to all of Cal CPA and its members and the companies that it represents.
Rise and Stride is produced by the California Society of Certified Public Accountants. To learn more, visit calcpa.org.